Okay, so today, my friends, we are going to start with a discussion of the nervous system. And this is the second of three videos regarding the nervous system. And today we're going to talk about the divisions of the nervous system, but specifically we're going to concentrate in this video on the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Well, in the next video, the third one, we'll talk about the peripheral nervous system some more. The brain is found, of course, inside the cranium, and the spinal cord runs the length of the vertebrae. All right, and essentially, the central nervous system is in constant communication with the rest of the body through the peripheral nervous system. And so, a sensory impulse will be sent from the peripheral nervous system up into the brain or possibly the spinal cord. The information will be processed in the central nervous system, and then there'll be a response going back into the peripheral nervous system through the motor neurons. Okay. But only the interneurons are really part of that central nervous system at all. So this, again, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Because they're very important organs, they are both protected by bones, the skull and the vertebrae, membranes called meninges, which are there are three of these that wrap all the way around the brain and the spinal cord. Meningitis, by the way, is a swelling of these membranes. And between the membranes themselves is a fluid called CSF, or cerebral spinal fluid, and this cushions and protects the central nervous system. Both the brain and the spinal cord are made up of two kinds of tissue: gray matter and white matter. Gray matter contains cell bodies and non-myelinated fibers. These are mostly interneurons, whereas white matter contains myelinated axons. These are the sensory neurons going in, the axons of the sensory neurons, and the axons of the motor neurons going out. Now, the spinal cord extends from the base of the brain all through the vertebrae down to number 26 or 27-ish. Remember that the last few vertebrae are fused together, and the spinal cord kind of peters out toward the end. It functions to communicate between the brain and most of the body. And so what happens is that the brain will be up here somewhere, and this is the length of the spinal cord. And you'll see branches here and here and here. And these are going off into peripheral nerves, which then spread out throughout the body. The picture here illustrates where those nerves come out from the spinal cord. And this diagram here is actually a photograph of a spinal cord, and you can see both white matter in this area and gray matter in this area. Okay, notice that the gray matter is shaped kind of like a butterfly. The spinal cord can also be the center for a reflex arc. All right, and a reflex arc is simply a signal that is so important that we don't even take the time to send it to the brain to be processed. All right. For example, if you put your hand down on a hot stove, or I do this all the time, I constantly touch the door of my wood stove with the back of my hand while I'm stoking it with firewood, and I immediately jump back, and then it starts to hurt. Okay. I actually responded before I felt the pain, and the reason for that is that the information went through a reflex arc. It went from my hand directly to the spinal cord and right back without going to the brain first. It's only afterwards that the signals are sent to the brain and you start to feel the pain. Okay, now there are four major portions of the brain. You've got down here the brain stem. This is the evolutionarily the most ancient part of the brain, and it controls the most basic of functions. You've got the diencephalon here. which contains the thalamus and the hypothalamus, as well as the pituitary gland. This is mostly in control of homeostasis. It's also important in controlling the endocrine system, which we'll talk about in a few days. You've then got the biggest portion, which I missed there. The biggest portion is the cerebrum, which controls a lot of different things. And then down here, this clover-looking thing is the cerebellum, and that's mostly for motor control, balance, and that sort of item. So what does the cerebrum do? Well, this is the largest portion of the brain, and it's divided into 4 lobes or 4 hemispheres, okay? Or 4 lobes per hemisphere, I should say. The frontal lobe is important in conscious thought, all right? The frontal lobe, I actually did that on purpose. So the frontal lobe is essentially here, okay? And this is where your thought comes from. Think about that. Where are you thinking? You're thinking here, not on the side, not in the back, not in your butt, right? Your conscious thought comes from the frontal lobe. The temporal lobe is for hearing, smell, and speech. And that lobe is located approximately here. The parietal lobe is for touch. That's what this big fancy word here, somatosensory, means, and taste. And the parietal lobe is essentially this area in here. And then finally, damn it, I missed. And then finally, the occipital lobe is the primary visual area. So let me go back here and erase this, or not. Sorry about this, boys and girls. I'm still getting used to this online stuff. Makes Mr. Anderson look like a pro, though, doesn't it? So the parietal lobe is approximately here, and then the occipital lobe is about here. Notice the occipital lobe for vision is actually in the back of your head. Isn't that weird? All right, but it's true. Now, the diencephalon contains the hypothalamus, which helps maintain homeostasis. It receives most of your sensory input except for smell, and it's involved in memory and a few other things. Now, if we go to, where is the next slide? There it is. Sorry. Okay, so we've got, now I'm just getting all confused. I'm very sorry about this. So diencephalon, let's move on to the next, okay? So the 4 lobes here, all right? What I want you to notice is in that previous picture, did you notice the blue and the orange? All right, let's go back. All right, well, in that case, you find that the front portion is the motor area, and the back portion, the orange, is the somatosensory area. These diagrams are called homunculi. And what they are and what they represent is the amount of brain tissue that's associated with various pieces and parts. All right, notice your head, neck, and trunk don't take up a whole lot of brain space, but your hand, a lot of brain space. Your face, a ton of brain space. All right, so what that means is that all the areas that you are sensing touch with, all right, notice how big the hand and fingers are. And then right next to that is a parallel portion, which is the motor area. So lots of motor nerves in the hands, lots of motor nerves in the face, not so much in the trunk, okay? Or even in the legs, relatively speaking. Now, the cerebellum, the clover thing at the back of the brain, clover-shaped thing at the back of the brain, receives and integrates sensory input from the eyes, from the joints, and various other muscles here. about where your body actually is. So it helps you to maintain your posture. It coordinates voluntary movement like riding a bicycle, playing the piano, that sort of thing. And finally, the brain stem is the oldest portion of the brain, and it is composed of a number of different parts. Um, the one that we've talked about most frequently is the medulla oblongata, which is where the reflex centers for breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure are found. Right? Again, things you don't really think about. Now, your brain, of course, is responsible for higher mental functions, learning, memory, both short term and long term, and skill, and also language. So, learning is just what happens when we recall and use past memories. And a memory is simply the ability to hold on to a thought for a while. Short term memory is memories that you only hold on to for a minute or two. Now, nowadays, we Google everything on our phones and make phone calls. But when I was a kid, we'd look up a phone number in a phone book. We'd go, okay, yeah, 555-1212 and 555-1212, 555-12, and we'd remember it just for a minute. And then we'd dial. We'd say, "Hey, paisanos, can you send me a pizza?" And 5 minutes after that, I wouldn't remember paisanos' phone number anymore. Short-term memory. Long-term memory is the retention of information for a long time, maybe even a lifetime. And this can include people and things that happen to you, and it can also include numbers and words. So those are the higher mental functions. Now, this is the link to a Mr. Anderson video on the structure of the brain. Excellent video, far better than the one you're currently watching. So I do recommend that you copy this into your browser and then just have a look. Okay, so that is the end of video 2 of 3 on the nervous system.